After e4, c6, and knight c3, d5, knight f3, we have the Caro-Kann 2 knights. In today's videos, we're going to go through pawn takes and knight takes back, and then knight d6. In previous videos, we went through knight f6 immediately after, pawn swap, or bishop f5 immediately, even e6 in the latest one. Knight d7 is going to be the move of this video, and that's one of the most popular moves. Now we play bishop to c4, place the bishop in the best square, immediately looking at the f7 square, which is slightly weak, especially because black is far away from the from castling kick side, and so that's a well-known target. So black now goes on with e6. He could play knight f6, and we're going to go through that move as well. Let's look at e6, which is the most logical move because you all immediately want to reduce the influence of the light square bishop. White continues with d4, crucial move, stopping the knight from reaching any central square. After knight g to f6, logical and theoretical move, we swap. Knight takes, and then knight takes. We're also going to quickly look at g takes because it's popular. It happens a lot. It happened a lot in many games that I've played. So, but let's focus mainly on the best move, which is knight f6. Now white castles. So everything looks very normal so far. Everything looks fine. Let's look at bishop d6, which is a popular move, but it kind of gives white a tempo. White now continues with rook e1. And after black castles, very logical move, white goes on with pinning the knight. And this bishop is here to stay. So when I say that black had wasted a tempo, I meant that the bishop should have been better in e7. But let's go on. Bishop g5, pinning the knight. If the pawn attacks the bishop, we retreat the bishop to h4, we keep the pin. And this is going to be a weakness, and we are forcing the black player from going to e7. So remember, in this variation, when you see the bishop going to d6, go and pin the knight, forcing the bishop back. If the queen were to move away, for example, putting pressure on h2, needless to say, we're going to take the knight, pawn takes back, and then the plan continues with rook e4. So now here we have a very simple plan. Queen d2, attacking the pawn in h6, and that's going to be it. If we get to play again, Queen d2 would be played immediately. The king cannot protect in g7 because of rook g4 check, and then eventually h4, applying pressure on the h6 square. If the king goes to h7, then we'll simply move rook to h4 immediately with attacking h6. It's inevitable we're going to win. Bishop f4 doesn't work. We have two pieces attacking that square. So it's black to move now. That's our plan. What can black do? Two main options. Let's have a look at bishop f4. This is met by g3, attacking the bishop. The bishop will have to abandon the diagonal, and then we can carry on with the plan we just described. Or the bishop can play back to g5. In this case, h4 doesn't trap the bishop because f5 attacks the rook and gives the bishop a diagonal of escape. So we have to play rook back to e1. And now we have an idea of trapping the bishop because f5 wouldn't come with an attack on anything. So the bishop will have to get free. The thing is, pushing the h pawn is really bad because after taking the bishop, then we're winning a pawn and our position is getting amazing. This king is not going to last. f5, then we take the bishop, pawn takes back, and now we play queen h5 with an attack on the pawn and a crashing attack. How can this pawn be defended? Well, f6, black cannot forget that this pawn is attacked twice. So queen e7, protecting the pawn, and now white continues with queen h6. That is a great move because it stops the queen from going to f6 and then potentially g7 and maybe go for some attempt of swapping queens, reducing the attack. The idea of the white player now is to play bishop to d3, going for the pawn in f4 and pinning it because then we will have an attack on h7 and the pawn in e6 is still pinned. We're just about to win a pawn, but we're about to win a pawn in a simplifying endgame. So here we are. We have a plan of playing bishop to d3. And best move by black is f6, getting the queen into the defense a little bit. But then queen g6 check. We have an advantage of +5 something according to engine because we're about to win a pawn. And this pawn is a deal breaker in who's going to win the endgame. Black defending with the queen. Black again cannot forget that this pawn will fall. And the rooks going on, the rooks being able to control the open file will be not only material advantage but also positional advantage when it comes to endgame. And the king moving, then white wins the pawn in f5. Taking the queen now means that the rook will reach the 7th rank. It's easily going to be protected, preventing the development of the like square bishop of the opponent and consequentially even this rook, because the rook will be controlling the 7th rank. E5 might look like a nice attempt of attacking the queen, attacking this pawn, but the pawn is pinned, so the queen will just find a shelter in f3, and that will be it for this line. So let's go through f5 now, a very normal move. We play rook to h4, and we're going for this pawn. So king to g7 in this case might look possible, because black doesn't have to worry about the check. White now continues with queen d2, obviously, we're going for this pawn. And black can stop it with the f4 or rook h8. Let's start from rook h8. This is just reducing black's activity of pieces because black is now putting the rook under the pawn, and white will continue with rook e1, finishing development. The idea now is to play knight e5 and eventually be able to play queen to f4. Queen can reach g3, rook e3 and rook g3 is also possible, but with the queen would be better. The move knight e5 is just too strong because it will allow too many things to happen. So let's just have a look at f6 just for a second. The best move now is to take the pawn, and then if bishop takes, we're happy to infiltrate with the rook. That's just amazing to place a rook in e6, win a crucial pawn and double up and isolate these f pawns. If bishop doesn't take, we're happy even to retreat the bishop to b3 and keep controlling this file and having a fantastic bishop. Needless to say, f6 seems this seems the move that just blocks the knight from playing to e5, but the best move by black, according to the engine, but still leaves white with a great advantage, is b5. White continues with bishop to d3. And again, we still have a plan of playing knight to e5. Not only the knight is sitting in a great square, but most importantly, what needs to be understood is that this diagonal is now blocked and there's going to be access for the queen to go. And so if black continues with f6, in this case, it's possible because we no longer have double attack on e6. Now we will have to continue with c4, fairly logical move with double attack on the pawn. And pushing the pawn is wrong for black because then black is going to have a backward c6 pawn, targetable. We have an idea of playing c5, but a6 even is still met by c5, finally removing the bishop from this diagonal. And after bishop e7, black's position is now paralyzed, and white continues with the very strong g4 move. Of course, the pawn should not take here because then white will be happy to take this with check. We have a very strong bishop. The position is falling apart. So after black's best move, which is f4, pawn is protected by the queen. White continues very quietly, but inevitably with the move rook to h5 and the idea of playing bishop to c2 and queen to d3. The attack seems slow, but black can't really move his pieces. Bishop doesn't go anywhere. He's got no squares there from which he can actually go somewhere. The king is unsafe and the rooks are not playing. This bishop is completely blocked by his own pawns. So let's explore a different situation. So in the knight d7 line, we play bishop c4, and when they play e6, d4, knight f6, knight is traded, and then we castle. You might argue that after bishop d6 and rook to e1, black doesn't have to castle immediately, but it can avoid the whole pin on the knight thing. So he can leave the bishop in d6, because as you notice, after bishop g5, the knight is going to be very annoying pin, and it's not a pin that you can get rid of. h6, g5 will be really bad. There's no need for black to ruin his own king side by opening up the pawn so much, because in the Caro-Kann, they're not going to castle long side. That's really stupid. Well, okay, so let's go through this. White will now play a move that is thematic not only in this situation, but in every situation that looks like this. White plays the move knight e5. The knight is excellently placed in a square that cannot be attacked by a pawn. The black player will have to castle kingside. It's the only place where it makes sense to castle. And white now plays the usual bishop d3 in these situations. When the black player has only the knight in f6 defending the square h7, the knight in f6 is the best defender of h7. You can place your knight in e5 and it's sitting amazingly, because if bishop takes, pawn takes, this is going to be over for black. First of all, black loses the bishop pair. Secondly, most importantly, we get to have a pawn in e5, and the pawn in e5 is controlling f6. The black will have to move. Wherever he moves, e8, d7 doesn't matter, because then we will have a very strong attack on the square h7. We've got the two bishops. So black cannot allow that. Black will have to leave the pawn, the white pawn in d4 without allowing the pawn to go to e5, so the black can keep his knight here. But after the move bishop to d3, white has a very simple plan that happens in every one of these positions. Queen to f3 and queen to g3. You can tell why it's bishop h6 threat, which is typical threat, and the king can't really move to h7 because of the bishop. He will have to move to h8, but that will make the square in f7 weaker. Think about it. Bishop d7, it just puts a bishop behind these two pawns. It's silly. Rook e8 is a seriously weakening move that makes this square very weak, and it just doesn't stop us from going for the usual threats of queen f3, queen g3, and bishop h6. And this, in this case, will not be met by king to h8 because f7, as mentioned before, is a weakness. Rook e8 might be played, but then you go on with the usual plan. Black's best move actually here is bishop to c7. White continues with a4, important move. So we're going to start gaining space here. We've got nothing better to do really. We don't have to worry about the pawn in d4 because of bishop h7 obviously. So after a4, white is now opening the possibility to play rook to a3 and then getting the rook to join the king side. A move like c5, you might think that black is challenging the center and probably inducing us to play c3 so that we can isolate the pawn or something like that. Actually, this is a blunder because you can just take the pawn and there is no compensation for this. Bishop taking the knight. If you think that black will be able to take the knight and then we have to take back with the rook, only way to take back, then black can leave the knight in f6 without having to worry about the pawn in e5, deflecting this knight away. Well, that's not a problem because we're up a pawn and up the bishop pair. So that's just worse for black. So in this position, the best move by the black player is queen to e7. That's what the engine plays, and fair enough. I mean, it's defending the pawn in f7 a little bit further and allowing the rook some way out, developing the queen. White now continues with the move b4, and of course, pointless to mention that queen cannot take the pawn in b4 because of bishop a3 makes a skewer to these two, and so we would win the exchange. And the queen cannot go to d4 to put double attack on the knight because of bishop h7. The idea of the white player in this position is to play c3 and just keep the situation like this. This is one of those situations where you just keep winning space on the queen side. And basically you just wait because you exploit a better position. We've got this amazing bishop, the queen and rook on an open file. Black's got none of this. So we have no reason to panic and just take something or look for an attack. There's not going to be an attack right now. We have our plans in the previous position. We've seen plans like rook a3, well, not right now, but queen f3, queen g3. All of this is happening, and you just wait for your opponent to take you. If they never take you, you keep winning space because you have more. Anyway, it's black to move, and after rook to d8, white continues with c3. One good thing about earning so much space on the queen side also means that we're controlling more squares. So b5, for example, we have two attackers. c5, we have two attackers. And black was stuck in this ugly position where he can't really move anything. Bishop d7, the bishop is kind of blocked, and there are no other open files where the rook in a8 can go to. And if the black player wants to double up the rooks, then where all of these squares are ugly, d7 is taken. d5, the rook will be harassed by the bishop. d6 reduces the influence of this bishop, but then after rook to d6, then how are you going to double up the rook? You can't play bishop d7 to play rook d8 because then the rooks are not connected. And the maneuver bishop back to c8 afterwards is ridiculous. It's way too slow. And we still have much more space. We have still have the idea of queen f3, queen g3, bishop h6. Our rooks have more activity as well. After getting these pieces out, this rook is coming to e1 as well, potentially. So a move that looks right now like possible is a5. It comes from multiple reasons. First of all, black is finally counterattacking, and if black gets the take, then black will be on an open file with this rook, and the black bishop will have more squares to breathe. So now we continue with b5, keeping this rook less able to do stuff. The rook doesn't have access to a6, a7. The rook is looking very silly. Black has to be very careful to the c6 square because of the knight. It would be just amazing in there. So black can't really push the pawn in b6. And the bishop moving, black will have to remember he's got two attackers to c6 at this moment. Let's just have a quick look at what happens if the pawn takes, releasing the pressure. we take back with the pawn. We still have control over the square c6, meaning that this pawn move with the idea of developing the bishop to b7 is met by knight c6, winning the game. So the black bishop is still in trouble after the move, like after having the white pawn in b5, this bishop still cannot develop to a decent square. A move like bishop to b6, just to make an example, would be met by the usual plan of queen f3 and queen g3 and so on. We have these two pawns here doing just fine together. So black will now either be forced to take the knight, but that doesn't really work, because after bishop takes and rook takes, our plan of queen f3, queen g3 and go on with the support of this bishop becomes even stronger. Positions evaluated, like white has an advantage of almost two pieces, and then black is just left with this bishop. There's no compensation whatsoever.